Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome all new listeners, and welcome back to those who've heard my content in the past. If you want to know how to stay focused in your career as a sports PT and away from shiny object syndrome, you need to tune into this episode. Before I go on to the podcast, what is new, bigger, and better? I do have to celebrate those who've been following me for a while. My son Zach officially turned 7 this week, and this one was a wake up call on his birthday. This is what he said to me. He said, "Dad, will you not hug or kiss me in front of my friends at school?" And that was just a sharp dagger to the heart. And I said, "I respect that. Uh, but I'm your dad and I get to do what I want." And he didn't like that response. But I have to respect that. And as a dad of a 7-year-old who's trying to become more independent and is aware of his surroundings, I respect it. So yeah. So happy birthday to my son Zach, who's 7. My son Jacob is doing amazing. His words, he's about to complete sentences, which is amazing to watch. And then my daughter is sassier than ever. But other than that, life is good. I have a little little wrist frustration, a little wrist achiness. I recently just did, I think, 30 muscle ups in a very short period of time, and so I think that's where I got the issue. So battling that at the moment. But other than that, life is great. All right, let's go on to this podcast. Why are we talking about focus? All right. Um, here's the scenario. I have a lot of PTs who will come to me and they say, "Hey, I want to I want to build out what my year looks like. I want to start focusing on actually getting better because I feel like I'm all over the place." And then I'll meet with them a month later, and they'll tell me, um, I ask, "Hey, what's the status on everything that we talked about last month?" And I recently just had somebody say, "I didn't make progress because I just got these other things and blah, blah, blah." And I said, those other things are not the priorities. They're distractions from what we talked about. So that way you can line yourself up to be the sports PT that you want. And they said, it's just hard. I want to help this person. I want to do this. Then a patient asked me to do this. And I got to, blah, blah. And I thought, as I see more and more physical therapists, especially nowadays with so much media and so much things that can deter you in multiple directions, I wanted to share some strategies to one, if you're in this scenario, how to get out, and number two, if you're in a good place right now, how to stay there. Because the distractions that I see that are crushing people's professional growth, what'll happen is, you'll be on social media and you'll say, "Hey, like you said, you found a really good shoulder exercise, and you have a patient with back pain, but you were on Instagram and they showed you a really cool exercise for shoulder pain, and then you listen to a podcast of mine, and I tell you about professional development, you work on that, and then you go to YouTube and you find something for ankle rehab that you're like, oh, I have another patient." And so by the end of it, you have none of it that's actually done. And so you're like, well, I learned 4 new things, nothing was actually implemented, and I'll forget all of those things in 2 weeks, and the cycle just repeats. And so what you find is PTs will go through these cycles and they look for CEU courses and they have no intent. They're just like, "Oh, well, let me find something near me," or blah, blah, blah. And so you might take a taping course, which you don't have any clients or patients that you actually tape. So you take a taping course, you're on Instagram getting lost in the weeds, and YouTube is pointing you one direction. I'm telling you to go professional growth and stay, top of mind, and make sure that your like actual year is planned out, and nothing actually happens. And how many of you are frustrated with that concept? You're like, "Gosh, I just feel like I'm in this whirlwind of a circle and a cycle I just can't get out of. And I don't feel like I'm actually improving." And that's real. It is actually real. It's even harder now. I will say I've had it going through my professional career, and I'll share kind of why I was able to battle and I continue to battle this very, very strongly. And I do exceptionally well with this, and I want to be able to share my strategies. There's a lot of intent and focus behind this. It's not just saying like, "Oh, don't be distracted," and it's just as easy as that. But if you're on your phone, you're on your computer, you're listening to podcasts on your drive, you're listening to things on your workouts. It's almost like so much data, so much information. You're just like there's an encyclopedia or there's Google just being thrown at you on a regular basis, and it can be overwhelming. It's a good thing and a bad thing, and it depends on the right person and how you do it. But I'm here to share what it means for you and how this can be a very, very detrimental thing to your career and what to do to get out of it and avoid it. So the PT I was talking to, we were talking about getting more getting more background in strength and conditioning. And my big focus, I'm a really big fan of strength and conditioning. I think it's critical to your professional growth, and I think that it is essential to every patient that you actually see. Fun fact: I was talking to a patient this morning who recently just had a fractured femur and hip from a fall, as you can imagine. And they were out in a gym and they were recently doing like reverse sled pulls. And I looked at him, I was like, that's incredible. Good job. And you can't tell that this person was out 3 months from a hip fracture. And to me, that was so powerful that that person was there. And in most clinics, this individual would be going, once they were, walking normally and they had normalized gait and they were able to go up and down stairs, they'd be discharged. And I think that it's very critical for you to help somebody understand what the next level, and maybe they think that strength and conditioning is like loading all this weight and do all these things, when in reality, it's just progressive overload. Progressive overload just means just a little bit more than they can handle to develop, to create change and to create neuroadaptations. And I think that every patient, no matter what setting you're in, I think as a sports PT, whether you work in an orthopedic clinic or you work in a sports facility, that you need to be implementing this with every single person. And there's no way you're going to get better at strength and conditioning if you're doing the same thing. So here's an example. If you're doing 2 to 3 sets of 10 to 15 repetitions every single week, day in, day out, and you listen to a really good podcast on strength and conditioning, you read something on, back pain, you do something else on accelerated ACL rehab, you actually get nothing done with strength conditioning. And so this person was asking, well, like, I feel like I know what I'm doing. I just can't sit down and read the CSCS book because I don't have the time and it bores me and everything else. I said, that's a really good point, but the reality is that you are not doing this consistently, and there's a lot of other things that are pushing you a different direction and not just the actual book. So we navigated some priorities, and my role, my job at the time right now is to check in weekly to ensure that these things are getting done. And just it's a quick email. Hey, on chapter 47 or whatever it is, here's the latest progress. Here's what I got. And you might think, well, I can do this on my own. And that's great and all. But when you start having more and more chaos in your life, you have more distractions, you have kids, you have other things, your car breaks down, all these other factors. It's the last thing. Professional growth kind of goes at the wayside. Why? Because it's not immediate. It's not detrimental to your like daily life. And so that's why professional and your career path takes a back seat. Just because you now have a career and you're able to navigate that, but the challenge becomes nothing is urgent anymore, and you were serious about being progressive inside your professional development because it was part of, you were in PT school and you had to get a license. So you're like, great. And then you got your first job and you now have like all this motivation, and now life happens to you, right? You have credit cards, you have a home loan, you got student debt, you got all these other things, and those are now urgent and immediate. And professional growth, it's like, yeah, I guess I can just wing it. I can just totally just wing it and it'd be fine. Now it's not ideal. And so for those for those of you who care, you're still trying to listen to stuff so you can learn through osmosis. But the reality is, until you implement, you're just learning, you're not growing. And so um, shiny object syndrome is real. And if you think that you don't have it, you probably do. And if you think that it's unavoidable and it's very difficult for you to do, I have some strategies for you. So if you're guilty of this, here's what I can tell you. All right. One, it's normal. There's just so many people going through this. All right. Depends on where you're stuck. So one of the first things I can tell you is if I can set an ideal kind of pathway for you, if I was mentoring you and you were in my cohort and I said, okay, give me the forecast, give me what your priorities are. What do you want to do? And you said, I want to be an amazing sports PT. There's three rope tracks that I break down inside people that I mentor. There's a track for residency trained sports PTs. There's another track for SCS non-residency trained sports PTs. And then there's a track for non-residency, non-SCS sports PTs. And those are three different, very different tracks. And your exposure and experience and what type of a setting you work in determine what your next step are. So then I'll map out, all right, I want the forecast for the year. What do you want to get better at? What is it that you want to be able to do with your patients that you're not currently doing? And most sports PTs who are winging it on their own aren't really thinking about this. They're like, I'm kind of, you kind of wing it on like, I think I'm good at shoulders, so I'll just take a knee course. I'll take a knee course because I'm not good at backs or whatever it is. You pick it based on convenience. And the reality is that you have to pick things based on what is actually that you need to excel in your craft. When was the last time you designed an outlook on if you can build out a perfect year for your professional growth, what would it look like? So that's what I would do. I'd have you sit down and we map this out. I have a little card game, like a bingo game, and I'll look at, okay, what's the roadmap that you're missing? So I have acute injury management, I've got sports rehab, I got post-operative, I got return to sport, I got strength and conditioning, I've got injury prevention and wellness program design. There's just so many layers to this. So I ask, okay, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Map out what a professional year would look like. If you want to get better at your craft, what are you missing? Well, I want to get better at strength and conditioning. Perfect. Do you want to do the SCS or CSCS or not? No, I don't want to. Perfect. So then you now have to navigate this on your own. Do you want any other credential certification? No, I just want to get better on my own. Perfect. When you have this type of a setting, you have to be now more focused and rigid. What is the definition of having exposure and experience within strength and conditioning? Ultimately, you only have to have three different templates. You have to have an upper body, a lower body, and a core strength type of a template for strength and conditioning. So ultimately, what it comes down to is you have to design three master templates to be able to do this. So the only way you're going to get better at this is actually implementing. So you have to learn the fundamentals on progressive overload and then create your own three basic templates. Now, designing them and actually doing this is the homework. And this will take you about 2 to 3 months per template to really refine this, put people through it, and make out what like really looks good. So if you're trying to do this across a year, you would create your three basic templates and then implement across the year. So my test to you would be like, I want to see all three templates designed for multiple patients, and I want to see examples of those. Now, let's assume that you do one patient per month. That's 12 completed templates. So I want 12 programs done by the end of the year. And what I'll see people find is, they'll commit to this. And by week or month 3 or 4, they're like, I just haven't been able to get to it. Yeah, you're right, because you haven't focused on it. And you get distracted. What are you good at? Nothing. You get generalized, and you're like, I'm not really good at any of it. I learned a little. I was distracted. I learned about a little bit of blood flow restriction. I learned a little bit more of like electrical stem. I learned a little bit more about manipulations. And yeah, the reality is that you're compartmentalizing things, and that doesn't really work well. I think you have to create the foundation. So what is it that you're good at? What are you not good at? Create the year. And what is it that you need to focus on? That alone, that question alone should already get you kind of frustrated. Like, what do I need to work on? What's the thing? If I could map this out, what would it be? So I would create that for you for the month, or excuse me, for the year. Design what you want to be able to be good at and what you don't. Perfect. Once you know that, gosh, that's so easy now to focus. But here's the problem. Here's the reality now is now you have to stay focused. This is where I meet with people monthly to ensure things are going on and going right. And I'll have them fill out kind of templated questionnaire. So that way I know everything that's happening and I know that you're on the right track. And when I see very, very short responses or empty answers, I know that you're not making progress. So for most people, what you need to do is define what that pathway looks like. Number two, all right, I am all about social media. I think YouTube, Google, any form of social media is fantastic. I think it's good for distractions. You have to understand, um, you have to use what are you using the platforms that you're on? What are you using them for? And for most people, it's entertainment, right? Like you go on there to just get sucked in, to laugh, to have a good time, blah, blah, blah. Now, the problem becomes is when you use these things for education. And that's what I see a lot of sports PTs tell me. They're like, well, I saw it on Instagram, I saw it on YouTube. Hold on. But the problem is that how do you, if education is based on growth, right? Implementation, use it and move on. The problem is that if you're on social media for growth, you learn and you'll scroll through 47 videos and none of it actually gets implemented. You'd maybe try one or two exercises and you're like, that didn't work, and you move on. Those don't actually improve your toolbox. They just give you more fancy things to try, but they don't improve your framework on how to approach somebody. And one of the best things you can do is approach with a better framework. The problem is that you don't know what the framework is. So we rely heavily on tactical skills such as exercise to hopefully conquer the source. Well, the problem with this is that once you look at media and you use these things to help guide you, it's overwhelming because you pick up the phone 20 times and you learn 47 different things and you don't remember from day to day. So now it's just wasting your time. Now you're pushing all these things and that's fantastic. Here's what I would say. I'd say determine if you're using media for growth and then figure out, in an ideal world, you would figure out what is the focus for the month that lines up with the thing I need across the year. I'm working on acute injury management. I'm working on sports rehab. I'm working on ACLs. I'm working on a golf program, whatever it is. So there's a focus. Now you go backwards. Perfect. So for month one, I'm working on flexibility and mobility for hip pain, whatever. Perfect. And then month two, what are you trying to do? Well, I want to work on, from there, I want to work on power generation for ACLs to return to sport. Great. And then I want to work on testing to determine return to sport criteria. Great. And then what? And then you're looking at now progressive overload to return to sport in a wellness program. Perfect. That makes sense. There's sequential like learning progress across that. The problem is if you go to media, now that doesn't line up with everything you're doing. If you're using media for growth, it has to line up to what you're trying to focus on for the month that lines up for across your year. And when you can do that, now you say, well, I don't have a plan. I don't have any of that. Okay, that's fine. The thing I can tell you is focus on a concept or a topic per month. So like I see a lot of shoulders, and that's where my confidence, where I lack confidence. Perfect. Then August or September is your shoulder month. What are you working on? All right. Well, I'm gonna be on YouTube for everything shoulder. I'm gonna be on my podcast. I'm gonna work on some shoulder stuff. I'm gonna work on Instagram. I'm looking up shoulder. I'm looking whatever it is that you're doing. Because if you're now adding in hips, everything else, nothing is really getting accomplished for the shoulder. And so if you feel like you're getting lost and the reason why you're frustrated at work with your patient outcomes is because you think it's compliance, you think it's the patient's not doing it, it might be literally that you don't have the foundation or the skills within that. So you take a CEU course that you forget after 2 or 3 days and really no progress is done. So I would put your focus across one concept, one thing per month, get really good at that craft, create the next month. And what you're going to do is you're going to find yourself like, wow, when will this eventually end? Because ultimately I should get good at everything. What'll happen is you'll get frustrated by compartmentalizing every month. And what you'll do is you'll be like, all right, so if this year was my growth year, what would I plan? And usually it takes your first year of just trying whatever sticks to the wall. This month is shoulder, this month is knee, this month is taping, this month is whatever modalities, and you get frustrated. So I would start there first. Start with creating the month and the topic. Get really good at that craft. Do that for a year and then move on to now planning in a year in advance. Now that takes a lot of prep work. And the problem is if you don't know what you know, if you don't know what you don't know, it's very hard for you to map that out. So number one, map out the year. Number two, have a focus for the month so you can stay on that. Number three, as you go on with these things and you map this out and you have your month to month, I would honestly coordinate with somebody, whether that's your mentor, whether that's your colleagues, your peers, someone to keep you accountable. You might say, well, I'm an adult. I can do this by myself. No, you won't. You won't do it. You won't, you just won't do it because it's not a bill that can kick you out of your house. It's not a flat tire that limits you from going to work. It's not groceries that if you don't eat, you're starving. This is not essential, but it's very critical. So it gets pushed to the wayside. And I'm telling you right now, based on everything that I hear and see, and all the sports PTs who are they're far along in their craft, they're phenomenal. They still need it. Everyone needs it. I still see my mentors for the same reason. What'll happen is early you'll see them weekly to monthly, and then you can start seeing them every 4 to 6 weeks. But ultimately, you need somebody there to keep you accountable and saying, "Hey, this is where I need. This is what I need. Here's what I'm gonna move. I'm gonna move left or right. I'm gonna try and work on these concepts. What do you think? What? Okay, perfect. Once you set that plan, great. Now in a month, did you accomplish everything you talked about? Yes or no? Perfect. The problem is right now, if you don't have a mentor, you're just doing this on your own. Your results and your craft are a reflection of how dedicated and accountable you are to yourself and others. And so, honestly, if you're still inside your first 10 years, you should be doing this on a regular basis. If you're past 10 years, you're probably able to see somebody a little bit less frequent and you can handle a lot, but the challenge is not just how many years you've been practicing, is how much chaos is in your life. If you have kids, you have a spouse, you have a dog, you have whatever it is, the more distractions you have in your life, the more they deter you from the thing that you should stay focused on in your professional development, if that is a priority in your life. What will happen is people will set priorities and then they move on, and then your professional development goes, it just drops. And so 3 4 years later, you're like, gosh, what happened? I used to be so motivated. The thing I can tell you, find a mentor, find somebody to keep you accountable. It could be your spouse. I don't care, but somebody who's actually going to like kind of give you a nudge. You know, spouse might be like, ah, I understand you're busy. They won't push you to that max degree. So find a peer, find a group, somebody online, somebody you can check in, somebody from your class, from your cohort, whatever it is. Hey, can we meet up in a month? Be virtual. Do just a 30-minute virtual call. Hey, I know you, let's do this together. You got 30 minutes. I got 30 minutes. Perfect. The 30th of the month, let's meet up virtual, 7 p.m. Let's just conquer. Here's everything I'm working on. I just want to make sure that I get it done. So outline the year. If you're not ready for that, focus on one thing for the month. Stick with that. And number three is find somebody just to keep you on that same process. These things will line you up to stay focused, to not be on Instagram to learn the 50 new things that actually don't get implemented, to be on YouTube to get distracted by things. Media and all these things, it's like TV, right? It's there to keep you entertained, not to educate. If you're looking for education, then you should be using that and implementing it in your practice. The problem becomes you learn all these things, but nothing actually gets done. And I can tell you this because I was guilty of it. I have been guilty of it. And the thing in order to stay on top of your craft so that way you're progressing on a weekly basis, not just you take a CEU course twice a year and you feel good about yourself. That's not learning or even developing or growth mode. That's just doing enough to keep your license. So that's the bare minimum. And I've said this on podcasts before. If you want to be a bare minimum PT, completely fine. But don't claim because you have certifications, you've taken these courses that you can manage pro athletes, you can manage people across a year. You happen to have a couple skills that you can implement when they are available or certain case scenarios. And if you want to be able to take anybody, where it was this patient that I just said from a femur fracture all the way into a marathon across a year at the age of 65, can you do that? Can you do that from a whole year and have progressive overload and not just 2 to 3 sets of 10? Can you imagine if they fell and now you had to manage that femur fracture? Can you now can do post-operative day 2 all the way down to discharge, and now working on progressive overload with the strength and conditioning program to a running progression with running mechanics and having progressive overload there and having a wellness program to get them onto that point, and so that they're actually safe across that and manage them across a year and not just discharge them because they now have 5 out of 5. and manual muscle testing and have normal range of motion to be able to execute the things on their own, but they don't have the education. And imagine telling that person, hey, just go watch Instagram or YouTube and find some exercises. They don't have the foundation. They can develop a couple exercises, which are skills and tactical skills, but they need the whole approach. They need the whole roadmap. They need the whole outline. And that's the same thing to you and your craft. If there's no outline, you're just learning great exercises that aren't going to put it all together. And if you want to be able to put it all together, that's where you have to look at the whole year. You have to look at what is it that I would do. And if you need help, the best thing I can tell you right now is you got to find someone. And those who have tried it on their own, and they've been frustrated, or you're like, I'm not wasting any more time. The best thing I can tell you is to join my Sports PT Academy. And this is probably the most passion I have, because I understand what you're going through and I understand what you will be going through. It's for the person who is frustrated trying their own, who doesn't want to say make the same mistakes, who has tried it, they've done it, didn't work, used other people, and it still hasn't worked. Or there's just so much chaos and busyness in their life that they just need the accountability. In either case, if you're stuck and if you're looking, you're trying to grow, you don't want to rely on CEU courses to put it all together for you, and you're just looking for the additional support, somebody to like push you there and give you that outline. That's who the Sports PT Academy is for. And if that's for you, I'm happy to do this. I'd be passionate to push you. I love doing this because I love seeing the growth that people make. If that's of interest to you, go to my website, drchrisgarcia.com/academy. If you struggle to work with barbell athletes, you work with CrossFitters, you work with powerlifters, you work with weightlifters. Actually, if you want to get good at your craft and you don't even know where to start with barbell, you take my Management of the Barbell Athletes CU course that is designed especially for clinicians and fitness professionals that want to work on mechanics. They want to work on corrective exercise. They want to know what can and can they be doing, especially if they have low back pain, shoulder pain. What modifications can you do? It's for the person who's trying to grow and not just rely on media, YouTube, whatever it is, or Google to give them a couple exercises. They're looking for like, just tell me what to do. What's the outline? What do I need to do? What are the progressions? And that's what I'm going to be able to provide for you guys. So if you're interested in my academy, we have a monthly cohort that meets up. If you're interested in the Management of the Barbell Athlete, that is in October 28th and 29th of 2023, whenever you listen to this, virtual and live. So I'm excited to see everyone that's inside the cohort and inside the course. Nonetheless, wherever you are in your practice, get away from this shiny object syndrome and make sure that you're staying on the right path. And the only way you're going to get there is by staying dedicated and committed to it, just like you were in PT school, just like you were right out of PT school, just like you go through these surges where you're like, I'm motivated. This is the year I'm going to crush it. And then just life just happens to you. And I totally get that. I'm just giving you an outline on how to reduce the risk of that continuing to happen. Or if you're in PT school now, and I can tell you right now, it's about to happen to you. So enjoy the structure. If you're a clinician, you've been practicing for many, many years, you no longer have the structure. You need to come back to it. So everyone's guilty of it. It's just natural. And I'm excited to be able to help. So I hope you guys are doing fantastic and crushing it with your patients, your athletes, and you're doing exceptionally well. So I will see you guys on the next episode, and I'll take care.